Hi, and welcome to Youth Aliyah Child Rescue's last of this series of conversations with amazing people from all over the world. Tonight we are being joined from, I think, sunny California. It's always sunny in California, isn't it? Heather Morris. Heather is a best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author, and multiple best-selling books. Originally most famous for The Tattooist of Auschwitz, which we will talk about shortly. Prior to becoming an author, Heather worked in the social work department of a large hospital. And before that studied political science, got a degree in political science. So she has taken the scenic route to get to where she is today. And I'm delighted to welcome her back. Heather very kindly gave us some of her time this time last year, and very kindly agreed to come back again and talk to us once more about what she's been up to and her most recent book. So Heather, hi again, how are you?
Oh, hello, thank you. I'm great, as who wouldn't be in San Diego, California.
Yeah, it's true. It's hard to be sad when you look out at the sea.
Yes.
Yeah, it's true. So I know that you've been really busy, in pandemic terms, as busy as anyone can be during the pandemic. We were saying before we started the webinar that the pandemic has forced all of us to be a little bit more techie. So let's go way back when pandemics didn't factor into things at all, and talk about, where did you grow up?
Hey, look, one of the wonderful things about talking to you in San Diego, California, is that I'm here staying with my brother and sister-in-law. So in talking about growing up, he and I, of course, when we get together, which it's been 2 years since I've seen them, we do talk a lot about our childhood and our family of origin back in New Zealand. And we try to make it less, probably more colourful than it was. We were a very small rural area. We didn't really have a town, but dairy country in the middle of the North Island, and grew up in an area where cows outnumbered humans by a significant amount. And look, only when you look back, I think sometimes as an adult, do you say, you know, maybe it wasn't a bad childhood after all. Yeah, we had lots of freedom. We were probably what you would call feral, free range, in terms of being able to disappear after school and on weekends, and our parents have no idea where we were. And we'd be doing dangerous things like in creeks and rivers and going up mountains and getting lost. But only in reflection, I think all of us can look back and say, maybe it wasn't so bad at the time. Couldn't wait to get out of there.
And you and your brother both did get out of there quite far.
Yes, we did. And 3 other brothers as well. There were 4 boys, all fled New Zealand, actually.
Really?
And that sounds terrible, isn't it? Because it's actually a really lovely country. And we all now can't wait to get back there and spend time there. But in terms of it being a very small environment we grew up in, and it was quite claustrophobic, 99% of the people around us we were kind of related to.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just so very.
I was going to ask if there was much diversity, but if you were all related, I'm going to guess not.
Oh, the diversity that existed was, there was a group, it's called a pa, which is like the Indians would call it a reservation, but there was a community of Maori in the village with us as well that we did grow up with. So I, in fact, spent more time playing at the pa, with these, or marae is another word for it, with the local sort of Indigenous boys and girls who made up 90% of my friends. So there was a diversity.
So were you at school together? Were you in the same school?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So
it was a very
quite
different
from in the US, where it is very...
No, it's not like that. They just live communally, but we all went to school together. But the school only had 3 classrooms. It tells you how big it was.
For how many years? Like, how many year groups?
6. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 6. Yeah.
So pretty small town. So I'm going to guess that the Jewish population was not prominent where you grew up.
I think non-existent best describes it.
Mm.
Because I suspect it was in an area of New Zealand that was very much generational and farming. There wasn't even any shops there. We had a pub, a general store, and a milk bar. And a post office. So no, and even when I went to secondary school in the nearest town, we had to travel for that. That wasn't, well, it was bigger, but still, yeah, I did not know a Jewish person growing up. I'm sure if they were in the local town, we would have known it, but we didn't. We had one Chinese girl in my classroom, and she was such a wonderful novelty to us. Sounds terrible, doesn't it?
Probably, yeah,
But
realistic
it's what it
for
was.
you, but yeah, hard for her, I would imagine.
Oh, quite the opposite. Man, we all loved her.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, we all wanted to be invited home to her place, and because you got the taste of different food, you got a total different lifestyle. And gosh, no, Winnie was the most popular girl in school.
Oh, amazing.
Mm.
So let's fast forward. You went to university and got a degree in political science, and then ended up working in a hospital. Tell me about that transition.
I actually went to university as a mature age student. I did not go straight from school. So I left New Zealand and went to live in Australia, and married, and then went back to New Zealand, but a different part of New Zealand, Christchurch, far away, and started university there with three young children. Moved back to Australia and concluded my studies at Monash University in Melbourne, but as I say, as a mature age student. While I loved studying philosophy and political science, I ended up working in the social work department of a large hospital. Once again, the children, their lives, they all impact on what you can do. You know how it is.
I do, yeah. So being a large hospital, you work with people who suffered trauma.
Yes.
And then little did you know that would prepare you for this stage of your life, where you're talking to a lot of people with a quite different kind of trauma. Tell us quick about meeting Lali Sokolov.
Look, to be asked by a friend over a cup of coffee to meet somebody because he wanted to tell a story to somebody who wasn't Jewish, who could have in any way anticipated it would lead me to be here speaking to you today? That was one of the most casual, random things of my life, to be asked to do that and to agree to do it and meet him. And in meeting this 87-year-old man who had just recently lost his wife of 60 years. And you know, I say that it changed his life and has changed mine. That's absolute. You can see how it's changed mine. I'm well into retirement age, and here I am having the most amazing time, not only writing stories and telling other stories, but traveling when I can. But when I say it changed Lali's life, this is the part that it changed, because I've been pulled up on this a couple of times. How did it change his life? He was 87, he'd lost his wife. It changed his life in the sense that when I met him, and for many, many months, he kept saying to me, hurry up and tell my story. I need to be with Gita. I do not want to be on this earth anymore. And that's what I got every time I saw him, 2 to 3 times a week for months. And what changed was when he realized that in telling his story, there was the potential for others to now learn about it. And he wanted to be part of that. He wanted now to live. He stopped saying, I need to be with Gita. He wanted to live every moment he could for as long as he could. And he did for another 3 years. So that was the change. He went from somebody who didn't leave his home, disconnected totally from the Jewish community in Melbourne, and just wanted to be with his beloved, to somebody who is now going out to all the social gatherings, taking me and introducing me as his girlfriend. And, you know, once again, being the Lali that everybody knew, embracing life.
Let's move to you then wrote another book, Silke's Journey. Now, the Tattooist of Auschwitz sold, last time we spoke, it had sold around 6 million copies worldwide. I understand that's now up to about 8 million. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Incredible.
Can't fathom, can't process.
Fantastic. You know, it's a lot of people hearing a very important story, and there are a lot of people out there who've never heard a story like that before. So,
well, you multiply that 8 million 3 or 4, sometimes 5 times in terms of people who've actually read it. So it's not a matter of 8 million readers. That's the absolutely incredible thing to try and process.
Let's take a minute or 2 minutes and watch a 2-minute video that will introduce us to one of the main characters in your latest book, which we can see sitting on your shoulder, Three Sisters. So we're going to take a moment and watch this video. You will see it in a second.
Me, my sister, my oldest sister, and me, we went together. And they came to fetch me. My sister told my mother that I was the smallest of the 3 girls. And she said, how will she go in the boat alone, a young girl? I am going with her, because they didn't want her. And she came by herself. She said, I am going with her. She was with me 3 years and 3 months in Birkenau and in Auschwitz. And they survived. I don't know how. I can't tell you. I can't tell you. Because always, every 2 days, 2 weeks, and 3 weeks, they made selections. And even looking terrible, you can imagine a person that eats a half of a piece of bread in the morning and evening, how like a person that is dead, but he has legs and he still goes. That's how they look. They knew what they are doing. They wanted to kill all the Jews. Heather wrote the book, The Tattooist. And my son came for a visit, and then I listened to I read the story, and I knew in a minute that I know the girl that the man talked about her, and she's from my town. And that girl, her name was Rita. I told her, Heather, that that girl went with me to school. She's from my town, and so she was very, very anxious to know about her. So she came here. Heather was in South Africa, and right away she came here to Israel. And so we met. And then I told her my story. She wrote the book.
Okay, brilliant. So this is our audience's first introduction to Livia. Tell us a little bit about how you came to meet Livia, and a little bit about how you got to know each other.
You heard her say, by the way, she's 96 years of age now, and still living in Tel Aviv in her own apartment. And so is her older sister, Magda, who's 98. She turned 98 on the 1st of January. But yeah, as she said, I was in South Africa and I read an email written by her son and daughter-in-law, who had taken a copy of the Tattooist of Auschwitz to Israel. They live in Toronto in Canada. Now, if you look on the cover of the book behind me or on my shoulder, it's actually the wrong book, because the cover you can see in the corner of the Tattooist of Auschwitz is the Australian cover. And you can see it's just black with 2 arms on it. And those 2 arms have got the tattooed numbers of Lali and Gita. That was the cover in Australia. And of the 50 plus countries who have published that book, Only Canada and Brazil took that cover. So if they didn't pick that cover up in Canada and take it to Israel, you and I would not be talking. Because it was when Livy saw that cover on the book and said to her son Odie, that must be about Lali and Gita. And he said, how? Part of the reason was, she said, look at the number on the girl's arm. Now look at the number on mine. They are 3 apart. And her Auntie Sibby, he said, your Auntie Sibby's was 2 apart. So I was in a small place just out of Cape Town, and I read that email early hours of one morning. I immediately wrote back, and after a few days we communicated by email, and then I got a message saying, Livy, I call her Livy, her name's Livia, but we call her Livy. She wanted to talk to me. So I rang her and spoke to this beautiful elderly woman. And after a few minutes, she said, there's so much I want to tell you about Lali and Gita. She thought that she just wanted to tell me about them. Like so many survivors I've met, and probably you too, they don't see themselves as having done anything special, as being anything different from so many others. They are just ordinary people. She wanted to talk to me more about Lali and Gita, because Gita used to go and stay with Magda in Israel when she went there after the war. And then she said to me, I do want to talk to you, but I don't like talking on the telephone, so can you come and see me? As if I was just down the road. Yeah. But I did. I did not come home. I went straight to Israel and walked into her apartment and into her life and the life of her family, and then to Magda and her family. Sibby died in 2014, so I never got to meet her, but her 2 sons and their families, 4 generations now all living together in Israel. And they started telling me about Lali and Gita, and just bits and bits were coming out. I would go there every day. I went there for just over a week. And every morning I'd go to Livy's apartment, and different family members would come. And we'd drink this very strong Turkish coffee and eat more than we should have, or I should have. And I was just hearing their story, and I'm going, oh my goodness, your survival is equal to anyone else's survival. Yes, you were ordinary people, but you lived through extraordinary times. And I said to them, look, really, to one of the second generation, can you find a way to record your mother's stories? 2 of them, Livy and Sibby, have made shower tapes, so they exist in that format. And by the time I left, the family sent me away to Jerusalem for the day, not knowing why I was being sent away, so they could all gather together, all the adult 3 generations. And when I returned, they said, would you be the person to write this story? And from there it went, and we did lots of Zooming and talking, and I did get back to Israel another time and spent more time with Livy and Magda. And this incredible story has presented itself. 3 sisters, guys. Amazing, amazing young girls.
And I will say, here it is on my shoulder too. It's a great read. Really, really an amazing story, beautifully told. Yeah, I highly recommend it. And again, it was quite serendipitous, wasn't it? To have the opportunity to meet them. I'm sure you receive quite a lot of emails and contacts from people all over the world.
I do, and I'm so touched by them. I read every single one. I know I have help responding to many because of the sheer numbers, but how people can just feel so open and share with me something tragic or traumatic in their lives. It's an absolute honor and privilege to receive these emails and these messages. So humbled by it.
And you have said of both Lali and of Livia and Magda that you have become part of their family and they've become part of yours. Yeah, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, how else can they trust you to tell their story if they don't get to know you? And also your family. Now, the people in Israel have not met my family back in Australia, but trust me, they know of them. And they ask every time we're talking, and I'm going to be talking to the two, Livy's son and daughter-in-law in Canada tomorrow. I've got a WhatsApp video lined up with them and her daughter in Israel later on the week. And they automatically ask, you know, how's the little one, which is my 2-year-old grandson. They know who my family are. I've met all of theirs. And one of Livia's granddaughters got married in October, and I was invited to the wedding. But thank you, COVID. Thank you to the Israeli government who would not let me in and the Australian government who would not let me out. I couldn't go. And so I spoke to the family about how I wanted to be part of it. And they wanted me to be part of it, find a way. And here's the wonderful thing that we did as a wedding gift to me, which is still being put together, by the way. I said, can I have made and get a cinematographer and a sound technician to come and film the wedding, and it will be my gift to the families, because all the other family members were going to be present. And the bride and groom said that would be wonderful. They agreed to it. But not only have we made this incredible video, which went for about 3 days, by the way, so that's why it's having to be edited and taking a bit of time by professional editors. But with the modern technology, I was able to live stream watch it all. So I was there lying in my bed in quarantine in Brisbane because I'd moved state in a hotel at the early hours of the morning. So very much part of that family, and they're mine.
Yeah, I think most of us by now have experienced being at an important event on Zoom or you know, or another platform, but yes, being there virtually.
Yes.
And you know, it would all be so much worse if we didn't have that, so we shouldn't complain. We'll look on the bright
No,
side.
I'm not.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how you start writing. How do you take that first step, and what does the process of taking somebody's story and making it into a book, how does that process unfold?
Simply by listening to the people whose story you're going to be hearing and everyone else connected to it. I don't record, I don't take notes. My memory and ability to actually tell these stories comes from my totally understanding and getting all the nuances and the subtext behind what I'm hearing. And I can only do that if I just listen. So that's what I do. Now, of course, there's also other research involved, and with Sibby and Livy, I was able to get their shower tapes, and I had to get them translated because they were in Hebrew, but I read them and then I watched them, because watching them was just as important as seeing the words that they spoke, particularly with Sibby, who I couldn't meet and never met, of course. And to be able to see this woman well into her 70s, I think, when she made it, trying to get a handle on what she was like as a person, that came from watching for 2 hours, not hearing. Didn't matter what she said, it was her body language, how comfortable she was in owning that camera that was in front of her face, even though that would have been something very alien to her. Such was her strength of who she was. And so that enabled me to get to know Sibby. Of course, Livy and Magda, I spent time with them. I got to know them. So for me, it's that kind of research which comes from watching videotapes, having professional researchers then go and find documents and what other supporting material we can get, but primarily just listening. And I read many, many years ago, when I first started dabbling in screenwriting, I read a quote from an American screenwriter, William Goldman, brilliant screenwriter. And to him, when writing stories of this nature or any other story, he said, very simple technique: research, research, research. Now throw the bloody research away and write the thing. And that's actually what I do. When I do sit down to write, I have no papers near me. I have no documents, nothing. If I haven't got it up here, it's not going to come out on the page in a way that you can read it and relate to it. So it's I have never had any writing lessons. I've never been to creative writing classes. No one's ever said to me, this is what you do to write a novel. So I've had to find the way that works for me. And it starts with listening.
Which is not dissimilar from your work in the hospital.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
How can you help somebody if you don't listen to what the problem is?
That's right. Do you see the trauma response of Holocaust survivors as being similar to other forms of trauma, or is it distinct?
Look, I think for my part of where I worked in a hospital, it is different. I worked in an acute hospital. So the people who I came across and who I helped, they were there because of an acute tragedy or trauma episode to them or their family member. And my time with them was short-lived. It was dealing with that immediacy. There were other social workers where I worked who worked in different areas of the hospital with, say, cancer patients, renal patients, those who had the chronic illnesses, very different. That was ongoing. That involved lots of other family members and friends as well. I worked very much in just the acute phase. So dealing or meeting with people like Lily and Livy and Magda and many, many other survivors, having to then try and engage in the kind of self-care that I didn't have to in the hospital setting, because you never got to know them well enough for it to have that transference of their trauma. So it was different for me. And it took a colleague smacking me around the head when Lally started to get to me to remind me that it was not my pain, it was not my trauma, my guilt, and I had no right to even think I could own any part of it. So that's a lesson that I knew from an acute phase, and I had to then extrapolate out into these incredible people. And here's the funny thing too, when it comes to writing, I can actually disassociate myself from the words I'm writing. I sit there and I write the most evil, horrific things on the screen. They're just words. And it doesn't seem to affect me when I'm writing them. But please don't ever ask me to read what I write. That's a different story again. I cannot. Well, of course I do, but my gosh, that's when it gets to me, reading it.
Yeah, there's a lot of pain in your books.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks. It's but how lucky am I to have had this incredible story of Lily, which was this beautiful love story between a man and a woman. And now I get to tell the incredible love story of sisters, of siblings, which is just as intense, which is in some ways way more, well, it's unconditional forever.
Mm-hmm. And the three sisters, of course, had their relationship before the Holocaust started. That was an already established
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked about how do I start telling these stories? Well, through all that listening and getting all those vignettes and the storylines, because I'm sure and most people know that when you talk to somebody whose storyline runs beyond just the last 48 hours, and we're talking about many, many years, they cannot tell it, of course, in a sequential, this day, this day, this day. Its memory comes out in all manner of jumbled up and disorganized stories. And so by hearing them all, or hearing the bulk of them to begin with before you start writing, I was looking for, well, where's my opening? Where's my starting point? And it was quite some time, I think my second visit to Israel, that I was trying to get background to their life in Slovakia and to their parents. And I said, what was it that kept you together when you were separated? Because for anyone who hasn't read the book, the story has a dual narrative of Livy and Sibby in Auschwitz-Birkenau and Magda back in Slovakia with her mother and grandfather. And they've just kind of looked at each other, these two beautiful, beautiful elderly women, and said, well, it was our promise to Papa. And you go, hang on a minute, back up. What? And they told me about the promise they had made as little girls to their father, not knowing.
Which
and here's a spoiler alert, by the way, folks. Well, the promise was that they would stay together, look after each other, support each other, no matter what. And when they made that promise, of course, there was no way they could know that their father, in fact, spoiler alert, died the next day. So that promise to Papa, as they kept saying, then of course there was no if buts or maybes where the book was going to begin.
It's quite remarkable that 3 sisters survived.
Yes, but I've been told by Holocaust historians and academics that it's actually more like a miracle.
Yeah. Amazing, amazing story. So I'm going to just for a moment bring it back to our charity and the work that we do, because so many of the children that come to our youth villages come from trauma, traumatic home lives, traumatic country, geopolitical experiences before they come into our care. What I'm very, very proud of is the fact that they are given so much therapeutic support, so much love and nurturing, and they're very well taken care of, and they are given what they need to be able to process their trauma, so that they can integrate it into who they are, recognize that it is a part of them, and use that as a basis of strength to go on into their adult lives. What's remarkable to me is we have a generation of people who've undergone, what's pretty widely recognized as the worst trauma you can imagine, and they've come through it without any of that, without the music therapy, art therapy, animal assisted therapy, talk therapy. They just had to get on with it.
But here's the thing. Yes, they got on with it. Have they come through it? Well, it varies from person to person. Livy, being the youngest at only 15 when she was taken, hearing her tell me how from when they were freed, and by that time got back to Slovakia, she cried herself to sleep every single night for 10 years, crying for her mother. She stopped crying the night she became a mother. Just to hear her talk about that and what it meant to her, and her poor husband Ziggy having to, the first night of their wedding, race back to her sisters the next day and said, I don't know what I'm doing, but she cried herself to sleep last night. And they said, oh yeah, you just have to learn to live with that. She does. So they found ways. Magda, even talking to Magda in her late 90s, still you can see, and she admits of the guilt that she still carries all these years along. That she said to me, for 2.5 years I slept in my own bed. Well, my sisters were here in Auschwitz. Now that she ended up there meant that she then absolutely knew the horrific time they had. If she hadn't have gone there, she may not have been able to process it, but she did, and she saw it. And for 2.5 years, she didn't share it with them. Livy just smacks her around and goes, Magda, we've been telling you all your life, it's not a problem, we don't bother us. We were happy that you weren't with us. And so they never had the assistance to be able to deal with it. They found a way by having these incredible families of the support and love. The cousins, because Sibby had 2 boys, Magda had 2 girls, Livy had a boy and a girl. Now those 6 adults, I call them the kids, they're kind of my age. They are as close as any sibling could be, thanks to their beautiful mothers and fathers.
Yes, there is a bond, it seems, between many children of survivors, not just within families, but more broadly.
Indeed.
So you got drawn into a world that was quite foreign to the world that you grew up in, and as you'd mentioned, there's the first book, the Tattooist of Auschwitz, has taken you all over the world, and that has only blossomed, barring COVID travel restrictions. You have spoken to people all over the world and told stories of the Holocaust. Do you see yourself as a Holocaust educator?
No, I don't. I think the historians and the academics, that's their role. I'm very, very clear that these books may have my name on them, but they're not my stories. So when I'm talking to people like yourselves and others, I'm relating somebody else's story. And I'm just trying to share many of the stories behind the story as well. There's so much more that I can talk to you about with my time with these girls, and things that are clearly not in the book because otherwise it would just be too big. So I don't see it as an educator per se. There are people who are trained to do that. I've been lucky to write stories which are relatable to young people. And I'm so proud of the fact that starting next week, when the schools in Australia go back, they've been on summer break for now, that in the state of New South Wales, which is the largest state in Australia, every year, 8 and 9, boy and girl in that school will read The Tattooist of Auschwitz. It is on the school curriculum. It is now there. Now, many schools for the last couple of years have been putting it on anyway, but this is now a government directive.
Incredible.
And I know that it's on the school curricula in Russia and in parts of France and other European countries. So does that make me an educator? No, it makes Lully and Livy and Sippy and Magda educators.
And you are the facilitator.
Just the mouthpiece.
The mouthpiece. I'm going to just quickly remind our audience, because I forgot to say this at the beginning. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box or a Q&A icon. If you click on that, you can feel free to type in any questions that you want to ask, and I will read them out to Heather. I'll remind you that we are recording this, and so if you don't want your name read out, you can just ask the question anonymously. Otherwise, I will read your name out. But please do ask questions. We factored in time to do that. So going back to your travels, tell us some of the countries that you've been to talk about Lali and the Three Sisters. I know now you're in California.
Look, I've traveled on probably 2 occasions now quite widely throughout the United States, and many, many states and towns, from the New York Holocaust Center to community centers and small places in Atlanta and throughout this incredibly large country, and I love it. Into Canada, of course, and even more so now that we have the sisters, with one of the family members living in just out of Toronto. Throughout Europe, many of the European countries, and I was scheduled last year, gosh no, was it the year before now, wasn't it, when COVID came along and messed our lives up. I will be back in Europe in your coming summer. But in terms of some of the countries I haven't been to yet, which I was meant to have gotten to, and I can't wait to get into Portugal, Spain, Bulgaria, the Ukraine. I think the Ukraine could be having a question mark beside it right now. Yeah, but of course, many of those other European countries, Sweden, Norway, Finland, or they're Scandinavian, of course, Slovakia several times. I go back there to do research and to go to Lali's hometown, Poland, Hungary, many of them, still many more to go. South Africa, I have not been to South America, anywhere in South America yet. Once again, that was just timing and circumstances that stopped me going there. The Tattooist, and even now, and Silke, have done incredibly well in being supported in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and many South American countries. It's a matter of time. I would have done more in the last 2 years if I could have. South Africa, of course, which has been incredibly welcoming to me. There are large numbers of Holocaust survivors went there. And yeah, I'm very, very honoured to be able to visit these places and meet wonderful, wonderful people, not just in Jewish communities and settings, but in a wider setting as well. Universities and...
what has the response been like in non-Jewish settings? Because you know, most of our viewers tonight, if not all, have been to talks or events centered around the Holocaust and survivors. So we know what the atmosphere is like in the room, and we are all in some way connected to a Holocaust story of our own. You know, even myself, my family's from Iran, but my grandfather traveled through Nazi occupied Europe on his Persian passport, Iranian passport. I think it was still Persia. No, it was Iran. And he only wasn't apprehended because it was not written in English that he was Jewish. And so, you know, we all have our connections.
Yeah.
You speak to people who have no connection. What's that like? What is the response like? Is it very different?
Can I just say, it's interesting you commented about Iran, because all three of my books, now I think The Three Sisters is not quite there yet, but it's under translation, have been published in Iran. They have been translated into Farsi. The Tattooist of Auschwitz, I think, was the first book my publishers ever had that was translated into Farsi and sold in Iran. So very, very honoured with that. But in terms of, because naturally enough, I'm seen in first and foremost as an author, someone who writes a book. Mm-hmm. And books that have been, you know, I'm grateful, very successful. So many of my people who I speak to are there because they're wanting to hear about from me as an author. But of course, they get totally caught up in the whole Jewishness of the stories and the whole of the stories. Ask questions often that are quite different to when I'm actually, say, talking in a synagogue or in a Jewish community somewhere. They don't have, of course, the same family background and want to know more. So they, in fact, are in some ways more inquiring about the Holocaust in general. Jewish communities, of course, you already know it. You're wanting to, many people are wanting to share their own stories with me, and I just love hearing them, and I'm absolutely fine with that. I love it. I love it. So the difference is being with people, and sometimes it can be many hundreds, who in fact now want to know more. And they also want to know the story behind the stories. Oh, we've read your books, they'll say to me, don't tell me about your book. Now tell me about, you know, what was Lully really like? What were Olivia and Magda and their families like? So that's the difference, I think. The difference in the knowledge.
Have you encountered Holocaust deniers along the way?
Yeah, I have. Several times. They come to events. You know, I've not been confronted by one outside of an event per se, but they have come to events where I've been, and it's, you know, it's the same thing happens each time. I don't know what's going on there, that there's no actual confrontation of me as an individual before I start talking. They'll be sitting in the audience, and at some point during my chatting, you know, every instance, it's been a male. I'm not downing on males about this, it's just the way it is. They will stand up and start going off about it's all a pack of lies, and yeah, bad mouthing what I've written and what I'm saying, and getting quite vocal. You know, I've discovered something that works with Holocaust deniers that did not work with my children. I let them have a little rant for about a minute, and then I just hold my hand up like that. Now, I used to do that to my kids to shut them up when they were having a tantrum, and it never worked. And for some reason it does with an adult, and they do shut up. And just by holding my hand up, I will just very simply say, is there anything I can say to you to make you change your mind? And they'll go off again for about 30 seconds and go, ah. And then there is nothing you can say to me to make me change my mind. You have two choices. You can sit down or you can leave. And 100% of the time they leave. They're based, look, I know it's probably me, I shouldn't say this, but I think they're basically cowards. Because as soon as I stand up to them, sometimes my choice of language and telling them to leave can be a bit more colourful than others. It's called know your audience, read the room. Because obviously other people around them can get caught up in it. And for me, I need to shut this down really, really quickly.
Yeah.
I give them that 30 seconds and then out the door, mate.
Yep. Thanks for coming. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Yep. We have a question. I'm going to read it for you now. Phil Diamond is asking, he says, in the intro, you mentioned the Tattooist of Auschwitz as a trilogy. Can you tell us something about the other part that we've not spoken about yet?
It's kind of weird that it got given the title of being a trilogy, or the Three Sisters being the third in the trilogy. Look, technically speaking, it is not a trilogy of stories, because I'm told that to write a trilogy and call it that, you actually had to know when you wrote the first book that that's what you were going to do. And of course, I could not know that because I did not know that the other stories existed. So it's not technically one. And I think at one point on that, you can see that sort of little emblem up in the book. We had the conclusion to the trilogy, but publishers finally went, hang on a minute, can't do that. So it's not. They're three independent stories. They stand alone, but they are connected. They are connected because from Lully's story, he told me about Silke. And of course, I learned about the Three Sisters because they knew Gita and Lully. So in terms of it being a trilogy, it just is and it isn't. The connection's there, but they stand alone.
They do. So tell us about Silke.
Oh my, talking about her is in some ways the one person I've written about I never met, but for me in some ways can be one of the most emotional storylines to talk about. That this 16-year-old girl taken into Auschwitz in April 1942 survived there by being, and there's no way of glossing over it, guys, the sex slave of the Nazis, in particular the commandant, only to be accused of collaborating and sleeping with the enemy, as if she had a damn choice. Well, I suppose she did. The choice was death. She didn't choose that. And by the way, look, people have probably read some of the criticism of her story, that some survivors have said that she should not have survived, that she did survive under circumstances that no one ever should have, by allowing themselves to become a sex slave. She made that choice as a 16-year-old uneducated girl, and I will support her till my dying breath. I will place her on the highest pedestal until my dying breath, of this young girl who then spent 10 years in a Siberian gulag under, well, it's hard to say equally as harsh, but at least climactically, it was beyond anything anyone should have ever had to endure, let alone the brutality of being there. That she was to survive those other 10 years in Siberia, in the Arctic Circle, still find love, find a man, have a life back in Košice in Slovakia, and live until her, I think she was 78. A lovely, beautiful woman. I met her friends, I met her neighbors of many decades, and who they described to me and the stories they told me about her, once again, make me want to honor her for what she did to survive. Yes, she didn't talk about it very much. Time and place. For most of her life in Slovakia, she was under communist rule. She did not even identify, for the most part, of being Jewish in the apartment building where she lived with her husband, who wasn't. I met a man back there in Košice when I was there researching it. He came to a talk I did in a little bookstore. It was a really ad hoc, just thrown together chat. I'd stopped into a bookshop in Košice and to meet the book owner in there. And he, the next day, said, "Can you come back and talk?" And he went and put a thing on his window saying that I would be there. And gosh, he filled his bookstore at the end of the next day. There were over 80 people came. And while I was talking, and I just casually said, "Oh, I'm here because I'm doing research on a woman who lived here, Silke." And this elderly man put his hand up and said, "Is that Cecilia Klein, Cecilia Kovakova?" And I went, "Yeah, it is." And he said, "I know her, I knew her." And he told me how he was the only other Jewish person in the apartment building where they had lived for about 50 years, and how the two of them would get together for Jewish celebrations. So look, an amazing girl, an amazing woman. And yeah, I can't understand anyone who wants to criticize her for surviving. I don't get it.
Yeah, the urge to survive is pretty primal, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have another question. Somebody would like to know, would you ever turn any of your books into a TV series or film?
Oh, heads up, folks. The Tattooist of Auschwitz is well into development for a 6-part miniseries. So only COVID has prevented it already being filmed and shown on your small screens. It is still happening. It will come, hopefully sooner rather than later now, as things relax a little bit. And well, production companies are finding ways for COVID-safe filming, but yes, it's well into development.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Do we know yet who's going to be starring in it?
That's for the producers to reveal, not me. I'm afraid.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't get to say anything other than how it's traveling with the development. The scripts are written, the sets are under construction. Yeah, but that's all. Those are announcements beyond my pay grade, shall we say?
Yeah. Are you excited about it?
Oh, yes and no. I'm not sure I can watch it. It's going to be a tough watch, but I'm delighted that Bloody Story will just have another medium.
And who's making it?
The company, they're a British company that were the main makers of it. They're called Synchronicity Films, and they're actually based in Edinburgh.
Oh, amazing! And do we know
where it's being made in conjunction with, one of your major broadcasters and other broadcasters around the world? So
it will be widely available.
Oh yes.
Oh, fantastic! Well, that is something definitely to look forward to. So you have. Oh, I'm seeing another question popping up. Hang on. Let's see. So another question, you've talked about the trauma of survivors, but how do you deal with the stories that you hear, as they must be really difficult to listen to?
They are, but as I mentioned, my training and my colleagues for many years did teach me how to indulge in self-care, to know that what I'm hearing is not mine to own. And particularly with Lally, who often he would get me sort of upset with what he was telling me, particularly when he started telling me the really, really horrific things that he'd witnessed and experienced. My way of being able to cope with that, to be able to go home to my family every evening or when I'd been with him, because my family first pointed out that what's going on with you and Lally. I had switched from coming home from being with him and telling them about my time with him to when they asked me, how's Lally, just simply saying, he's fine, and giving nothing more. And that's when I realized that he was getting to me. So when I left him, and he was a funny bugger, gosh, he was lovely. He lived on the first floor apartment building that overlooked the road where I parked, and he had a little balcony. And he knew when I was coming, he was always hanging over the balcony waiting for me. And when I would leave him, and for many months, we never left his apartment. I only ever met him there. It was only after he got to know me that we started going out to cafes and movies and going out. But when I would leave him, he'd say, come on, I'll see you to your car. Now, to Lally, that meant taking me to his front door, kissing me twice on each cheek. While I walked down those stairs in that little path to my car, he ran to his balcony and would be hanging over it. And as I approached my car, I turned around and he'd be waving, I see you to your car. So I always had to drive off because he was there waving me goodbye. I learned to just drive up a short while and turn into a quiet street. And I would just sit in my car for up 10, 15 minutes, whatever it took, to what I call center myself. Sometimes I put music on, often I didn't. And I would just take in everything that I'd heard from him that was upsetting and distressing and get myself centered. Okay, all right. That's almost like that's one part of your life. Your family are at home waiting for you. That's your part of life you have to go home to. Be the wife and the mother they expect you. So yeah, for me, it was that few minutes in the car, centering myself.
So you have spent a good number of years now listening to and retelling stories of the Holocaust. Are you thinking about changing to a different genre?
Well, not really genre. I think historical fiction is something that I always want to write in. It's kind of funny that I don't believe I have the creative brain to write a story myself, to make one up. I'm not sure what that makes me. I go out and finding these stories, but there's the little snippets of the world around us that has happened and is happening. They are the ones that are so rich in story. And I have many others, by the way, of which I've done part writing of, which have come about because I read something in a small newspaper or something which was a throwaway line on a news item that just piqued my interest, and I've gone and followed it up. So not changing what I'm writing, finding those snippets of other parts of history, and probably recent history. I'm still not going to go past World War II. I might, depends how long I hang around for. But yes, finding other stories, because that period of history, there are many, many other storylines, trust me, worthy of telling. And the project I'm currently researching and looking into is still based in World War II, but it's going to focus on, well, they still, many of them are prisoners, but nurses, those unsung heroes, those people who right now we want to shout from the rooftop. We know they're heroes now, don't we? I've always known it.
So you're telling a story of nurses in World War II?
Yeah, probably 2 or 3 nurses in different areas. I'll find a way to weave them together with the help of my incredible publishers and editors.
Well, that is definitely something to look forward to. It's definitely nurses are, well, having been one and having spent a lot of time with many others, we definitely have stories.
Yes,
we definitely have stories. Amazing. We have another question. Will you have any say about the filming of the Tattooist of Auschwitz? For example, they may want to change or add characters.
Yes, I do. I am the script consultant, which means that everything written, 3 different script writers have been involved in writing the 6 episodes. And I am showing them, and I do get to say, no, I don't like that depiction that you're going there with that character. And of course they listen to me. Yes, so yes, I do have a say as a script consultant. In terms of adding other characters, 2 other characters have been added with my approval.
Wonderful. And how about the look of the sets and so on? Do you have any input into that?
Not input, but I'm told, and wow, what is being created, I can tell you, will do justice to the telling of the stories. This is something that is going to be developed and produced, really telling not only the story, but in some ways, maybe even telling it better. If that can be, that can be done. I'm not precious about my work. I know that it can be improved.
That's incredible to think that this meeting, this introduction to Lali is leading to this, and it will bring his story to so many more people.
Yeah, and look, I think it will. And that's the difference between a film feature released in movies, of which we had offers, of course, and a mini-series on television. The number of people who will watch a television series versus going to a theatre is significantly higher. So
that's pretty incredible. And I'm wondering if either of the other 2 books have also garnered interest.
Yes, they have, but we've not done anything about making them available yet. Just one mini-series at a time, folks.
Let me see if there are any more questions. I would say type them in now. And while we give people a couple of minutes to do that, tell us something that didn't make it into the book, The 3 Sisters.
What didn't make it into the book? A lot about their childhood. as fascinating as it is to me. It isn't in the book. Some of the other things which didn't make it into the book was things that we subsequently found out as the book was about to go to the printers. Let me tell you about this amazing discovery that we do have. Magda had mentioned that she had written a diary. Now, nobody in her family, including even Livy, who was there when the diary was being written, could remember it. We now have this document, some 80 plus pages, which has been found, written 77 years ago, in real time when those girls were on the death march. Magda, when she was in one of the concentration camps, when they left Auschwitz, they were taken from other camp to other camp, from Ravensbrück to Retzow to other camps. She went into the administration building one day and she stole a journal and some pens. Now, when the girls ran from the Germans, and they stood up to them and they ran, she started writing every day where they were, the time. Was it the Russians? Was it the Germans who were threatening them? And we have now about 3 months worth of daily written diary, journal notes, written in real time. Phenomenal. This is a historic document, which it's going to be, we'll put it out there. It's going to be made widely available. We just haven't worked out how yet.
That is incredible.
And the whole thing will be made available. You have read an extract of it in the back of the book, possibly. The book was due to go to the printers when the diary was found. I wanted to go back and rewrite their death march and get the names and the places and the times and the dates in it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't. It was at the printers. I was told I can have 2 pages, pick one extract. And that one extract, which is, you see, written in Magda's beautiful Slovakian handwriting and the translation. So there's way, way more to play out with the discovery of this incredibly valuable document. The original, which will, yes, it's still with the family at the moment. The original will reside at Yad Vashem. And the actual contents of it, which are purely astounding to have this document written. And we talked about Anne Frank's diary a little while ago, something that was written in real time. This too was written in real time.
Yes, that is incredible.
Yeah.
That will be a real gift.
Yes.
I have a comment and question from our trustee, Tina Curtis. We had hoped to host you tonight in our home. So for those who don't know, we were really hoping that Heather would be traveling to the UK, and yes, she had very kindly agreed to spend an evening in person with us. We were hoping to have you come to Tina and Anton Curtis's home and do a live broadcast from there. And Tina says, sadly, that was not meant to be. Will you come to London in the near future so that we'd be lucky enough to be able to spend an evening together with you?
Oh, look, thank you so much. Yes, I will be there. And I don't really care anymore about COVID stopping me. If the borders are open, I will be there at the end of May, and I will be in the UK for anywhere up to about 5 or 6 weeks, maybe a few jaunts into Europe, but I will be there for a significant period at the end of May.
And will you spend an evening with us?
I would love to.
Oh, I can't wait to meet you in person.
The Three Sisters is being released in paperback early July. So I will be there well and truly for that.
Perfect timing. We will be happy to help you to
Thank
get it into more hands. That would be amazing. Philip Miller has a question. Heather, do you find it very upsetting and you get angry when you have deniers calling out?
You know, I think neither one of those words describe how I feel. If anything, I feel sad for them. In terms of anger, no, as they say to me, there's nothing I can say to change their mind. And they're not going to change mine, obviously. So no, I just feel very, very sad that they have such a narrow view and can't be open to anything other than whatever they've been indoctrinated into. That's sadness.
Thank you. Do we have any more last minute questions? I know I'm being mindful also of your time, because I know you've got a afternoon and evening ahead of you, don't you?
That's all right. Yes, I do, but that's fine.
If we don't have any further questions, is there anything else you want to tell us that we didn't cover, or should we save something for May?
Well, so saving for May, but can I just say how delighted I am to be in any way supporting the charity and the cause that you and the amazing people who work with you and volunteer with you are involved with. The causes that you're involved with. I have been to Israel several times now, and so I know they need the help. You are giving it to them. And I just want to once again praise you and your organization for what you do and helping young people, because young people, hey, they're our future.
Yeah. Thank you for helping us to do what we do. As you said, you know, it's a privilege, it's an honor for you to be able to tell your stories. It's likewise an honor for me to be able to do this work to change the course of young people's lives.
Yeah.
I feel very, very lucky to
Indeed.
be able to do this. And I get to spend time talking to wonderful people like yourself. So I really can't complain. It's a wonderful position to be in. Thank you so much again for being with us. It's been an absolute joy. I do really look forward to meeting you in person. I hope we can make that happen.
We will.
Wonderful. I
will.
I look forward to that. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you to Michaela, who originally made contact with your publicists and publishers. Michaela Blitz, who has been volunteering with an amazing committee of volunteers who have put together over a year's worth of events now. This is the wrap up to that series of events. So a lovely way to go out in style. I want to also say a big thank you to Nicola. Nicola Gold worked for Youth Aliyah Child Rescue for probably, she can tell you by counting the wrinkles on her face. She left Youth Aliyah to make a brilliant career move and is now doing great work for Camp Simcha. But Nicola, being a woman of incredible integrity, has volunteered on her own time at the end of very long days of work to help us to keep these virtual events going. So she's been working in the background every time that we've been here on screen having fun. So Nicola, you're the best. On that happy note, thank you all very, very much for being with us. Heather, thank you again, and we will see you soon.
Yes, you will.
Thank you all. Good night, everybody.